Councilmember Young is present, Councilmember Contreras is present, and Councilmember Crummell is present.
Thank you. At this time, would everyone please stand? We'll have a moment of silence, and then we'll have our pledge. Thank you. Councilman Crummell is going to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you. We have no public comments to start. This time we'll go to approval of the last council meetings. The June 9th regular council meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes, June 9th, 2020.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Abstain.
Thank you. Abstain? One. Greg abstains. Item number 1 on the agenda items, consider and act on a site plan for a restaurant on Lot 2, Block 2, the Village at Willow Park, City of Willow Park, Parker County, Texas, located on the southwest corner of Willow Bend Drive and Willow Crossing Drive. Miss Betty.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This site plan is for a 3,600 square foot restaurant with outdoor seating and entertainment area. It will be located at 210 Willow Bend Drive. The development will consist of a 3,600 square foot restaurant with the outdoor seating. The 2 additional buildings, one will house a restroom, and then there'll be another 400 square foot building which will have storage and audio and video equipment. They propose 70 parking spaces. This PD was approved for restaurant use with a parking ratio of 1 parking space for each 150 square foot of floor area. They are providing additional parking because there is some additional, there's approximately 6,400 square foot of dining area, some indoor and some outdoor. That would require 43 parking spaces, but they are proposing 70. You can see the parking spaces that are coming down past the first entrance on Willow Bend Drive, and then there's an additional entrance on Willow Bend Drive further south. And those are the 2 entrances that were approved with the plat, with the PD. You also have 1 entrance over on Willow Crossing Drive, and those do meet the requirements for the PD that was approved approximately 2 years ago. The building will have city water and sewer. There are 8-inch water and sanitary sewer mains in both of the street rights of way, and fire hydrants will be installed within the development in accordance with ISO regulations. The stormwater drainage plan has been reviewed and approved by the city's engineer. This comes forth with a favorable recommendation from staff and also from the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you have any questions of the staff report, I would be happy to answer those.
Hey, Betty, where's the detention pond?
It is in the far southwest corner. That's it right down there.
This?
Yes, if you...
That little...
Yes,
this
that area.
Right okay.
And there will be...
couldn't read
the
it.
detention pond will be... the improvements will be made to it, and they're also going to do some additional grass and sodding for the undeveloped part of the property.
Is it going to circulate okay so it doesn't get stagnated?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it will sheet flow in that that kind of open channel area, and then it will go to the detention pond. The detention pond is designed for the ultimate development of all 3 lots, and since this is just the first one, it probably, unless we have significant rain, it shouldn't have actually any water in it probably.
Okay.
Any other questions for Betty? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan as read.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 2, consider and act on a site plan for an addition to the eye clinic medical office on 1.601 acres, Lot 1, Block 9 and 73, El Chico Addition, City of Willow Park, Parker County, Texas, located at 101 Chuckwagon Trail. Betty?
Thank you. This is a 2,300 square foot addition to the West Texas Retina Center outpatient clinic. And the addition is on the west side of the building. You can see it in the hatched area, and we also have the landscaping plan shown. There's an existing 10,000 square foot building, and this will be a 2,300 square foot addition. The building will be fully sprinkled for fire protection. There are 2 existing entrances which service the property and also serve as fire lanes. There will be some additional parking installed, and there will actually be on the west side of the building where they kind of have a little drive area, there will be some enclosed parking there for patients. And there's also a new entrance with a porte-cochere that will be on the east side of the property for pickup and delivery of patients. Existing water and sewer service the property. The stormwater drainage plan has been approved by the city's engineer, and the landscape plan meets the requirements of the city's ordinance. And this also comes forth with a favorable recommendation from staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Betty. Any questions for Betty? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan as read.
Second?
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty.
Item number 3, the City Council may consider, discuss, and/or approve a consulting services agreement with the Tommy Morris Agency to solicit sealed proposals for the city's group health, dental, vision, and life insurance. Mr. Grimes, is that you?
Yes. For the previous, I know we did last year, and I think maybe even the year before, or somewhere in the middle of the fiscal year before, we had secured the services of the Tommy Morris Agency for our health insurance, both health, dental, vision, and the others. We need to approve the consulting services agreement with them. They are paid actually through the fees. So we just need to adopt the agreement with the Tommy Morris Agency, and then they can, I think, Pat, we got to put the ad in the paper tomorrow, correct?
Correct, this week.
This week and next week, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. We'll put the ad in the paper for our health benefits, and we will get bids from those.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consulting service agreement with Tommy Morris Agency.
Second.
Any other questions for Mr. Grimes? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 4, discussion of Fort Worth Water Project update. Mr. Grimes.
Councilwoman Fennell asked for an update at the last meeting that we had. Sorry, I don't want to get this up and running. And asked half to put a status update, and it's still in your packet dated June 16. There hasn't been a lot of movement from that date. The hang-up is between the Dean Ranch, the Beggs Ranch, and the city of Fort Worth. And they're trying to find an alignment that is satisfactory to everyone for the water line. There was some confusion on one of the ranches that the line may have gone south, gone under the interstate, and then supplied water to the south side. That wasn't the case. And so I was told late last week they're optimistic that they can come to some sort of resolution. To be clear, this is not a Willow Park problem, but it is the problem that's stopping the progress of our project. And so to that end, we've been assisting as best we can with the city of Hudson Oaks and TOS to try to find a solution to this easement problem. Other phases of the project are moving fairly well. We expect environmental clearance done on everything. In fact, we already done environmental clearance, excuse me. We may start construction on the groundwater storage tank in the next couple of months. Our goal is to have the entire project put out to bid by September. I'm not as optimistic about that as I am today as I was a month ago, but that's still our goal. And so if you have an October bid time, you might have construction start at the first of the year with the ultimate goal of having the water supplied to us by May of 2021.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Grimes?
Do we have an itemization anywhere of like what monies have been spent?
We do draws. I can get that for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically what they do is, and with Water Development Board, as you'll find later, they will submit draw requests and they go to the state. The state has to sign off on all the draw requests. A lot of those are getting kicked back because it's not in the proper phasing of what Water Development Board deems. So if they put in something for, say, plant or design and you're still in planning, they won't fund it.
Is that something you can kick out to us like quarterly or?
We do monthly draws. Yeah, I can give them to you.
Yeah, just, I don't necessarily need them every month, but it would be nice to have.
We do, yeah, we do the monthly draws. When we start construction, they may be more every 2 weeks.
Okay.
But right now, it's primarily just engineering.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Grimes? Item number 5, to consider and act on a budget calendar. Mr. Grimes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your staff briefing sheet, we have a proposed budget calendar for you guys. August 7th, 2020, I have to file a proposed budget with the city secretary. I have the final draft of all 3 budgets, general fund, water, and wastewater. We're waiting on our value number from the state. I should have that by the end of this week. They have to get it to me by the 25th. That's a Saturday, so I'm gonna give them till Monday. We'll plug that number in. So far, every model that I've run, you will not see a tax rate increase, an overall tax rate increase. I think we're still at 53. It's up there somewhere. It's one of my notes on my up there on the dice, but we have the overall tax rate will not increase right now. We went to department heads, keeping with what we've been saying for months. We're going to try to keep a flat budget. There will be some increases. Obviously, health insurance is probably going to go up. Some of our liability insurances will probably go up. But as far as salaries and whatnot, we're still going to keep that flat for all staff. We have to have 2 budget hearings. We may not be required to, but I want to go ahead and schedule them anyway. If we go to the effective rate, we don't have to do it. But I want to go ahead and schedule them anyway. One for August the 25th. The other is for September the 1st, with the plan to adopt the budget and tax rate on September the 8th. If those are agreeable to council, then we can start plugging those in for the ads that we got to run in the coming weeks in the community news. And then we can schedule as many budget workshops with you guys as you would like between August 1st and August 25th, and we could even go up until the day we adopt the budget and tax rate. So that's our proposal for the budget hearing. We've had some feedback from council members. They'd like to get it done in the first part of September versus the later part of September. And so we've tried to accommodate that.
Okay. Any questions for Brian?
Does anybody have any issues with the 25th, the 1st, and the 8th?
No, when are we going to do a workshop? How many workshops are we going to do? Did y'all want to do, council?
I think what I had proposed and thought is that we have a council meeting on the 11th.
Okay.
We can absolutely schedule a workshop prior to that council meeting, 6 p.m. And then we would have potentially, if we felt we needed another one,
schedule another
the
one.
following week before the 25th.
Sounds like a good plan.
Was my thought. So I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Brian. Item number 6, review of the TWDB permit application process and timing for the wastewater project. Mr. Turner, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So you guys have seen, I guess, the little workup I did that was sent out. basically laying out the process of how you get through a capital improvement project through the Texas Water Development Board State Revolving Fund. And I'm going to start at the very beginning. The process starts with the Water Development Board's IUP process. So the very first thing you would do if you have any interest in doing a project is submit what they call a PIF, a Project Information Form, to the TWDB. It's a short form. It includes a very preliminary budget and some basic information about the city, and then they take that and a description of what you're wanting to do and why. And they take that, and for all the entities in the state that submit these, they rank them, and they develop a funding line based on the budget that they have for that year. And then whoever falls above that funding line, they will include on the intended use plan for that year for capital improvement projects. If you are above that funding line and on the intended use plan, then they will send you an invitation to submit an application for for financial assistance. At that point, once that invitation is sent out, the city then has the opportunity to either accept that or refuse it. And if you accept it, then you have to adopt a resolution to authorize the submission of an application for financial assistance. And that's the application process. And they have a very specific process for every step of this process, or of this system. Yes.
I just wanted, as you said that it's on the fiscal year for them, what is that date for the state?
Their fiscal year is October.
Okay,
into
so-
September, but go ahead.
But, so does that mean that we'd have to get it in by September to be considered for the October, or how does that work?
That only applies to the PIF.
Okay.
So you have to submit the PIF at a certain time. After that, once you get an invitation to apply, there's no.
Right.
You're not restricted to that
But
time.
would you be waiting until their next fiscal year if you don't submit your PIF prior to?
If you're on the intended use plan.
Okay.
And you, now there is a time frame for, once they establish that IUP, and then they give you an invitation, you have a certain amount of time to indicate interest.
Okay.
Once you've done that, they hold that money back for that fiscal year, so that could carry over fiscal years.
But I guess what I'm asking is, you can apply at any time. It's not a get it in by a certain date for their fiscal year financing?
No, except that, remember that,
To get on the IUP, do you have to, is there a date that you're looking for?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Get on the IUP,
Now
you have
what?
to get it in within a certain time for, it's usually, I think they give you 30 days.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look, but once you're on the IUP
Mm-hmm.
and you get that request for an application, you're in line with other entities.
Okay.
So they're submitting their applications. So as those applications come in, you get bumped further and further down.
Okay.
So
I didn't mean
there
to
is-
stop you. I
That's
just-
okay. There is some need to stay on top of the process so that other entities don't jump ahead.
So when did we submit that? Just
That was submitted, I believe it was June 24th.
June 24th of this year?
Yes.
The
The
application.
application was submitted. The PIF was submitted summer of last year. I don't remember the exact date. They do it, it's based on their time frame, and they do it a little bit differently every year depending on where they're at administratively. But
Okay.
I would assume the PIF, I believe the PIF was probably in June, somewhere in that time frame, maybe a little earlier than that. So we're in the application phase of the project. And once you've adopted the resolution to submit the application, work would begin on that. The application includes 3 different categories of information. One is engineering, one is financial, and the other is legal. The engineering application, portion of the application includes a preliminary engineering report. Generally, that's a pretty preliminary draft description of what the project's going to be. It also includes some water conservation information. Water conservation plan has to be included, a description of the project, a budget, a few other items on the engineering side. The financial side includes your audit, your current budget, a debt service pro forma, debt service schedule, taxing information, user cost information. And so you have a consultant that you selected to do that part of the process, the engineering obviously done by the engineer. And then the legal includes authorizing resolution, the service area information, designating the service area that you're able to cover, and a few other items that the attorney puts together. It's about a 400-page document, give or take, depending on the size of the project. It takes a pretty significant amount of time to put together. That application would also include procurement. You can procure before or after the application. They don't set the time for that or the time frame for getting that done. But if you have procured, then the application would include any procurement documents. There are several forms that you have to complete that demonstrate compliance with federal regulations related to procurement of professional services. So those would be included if that effort has been completed as well.
Quick question, is this the same process we followed for the surface water
It's
connection?
the exact same process.
And did we acquire land for the surface water project prior to receiving the funding?
No,
I thought we did for that site for the water tank.
We were funded.
you were already.
We're already funded, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is typical, and I'll get into why that would
Okay.
be typical. So that application is completed, submitted to the Water Development Board. They review it, and then they come back to you. And at this point, the city has committed nothing. The financial advisory, the bond counsel, engineer generally do those at no charge or very, very minimal charge. And the Water Development Board at this point has not authorized the issuance of any funds. So the city has not made any commitment to issue debt and has not, and if you have done procurement, any contracts are contingent upon release of funds from the TWD, that's stated. So anyway, there's no commitment from the city at that point. The Water Development Board reviews the application, then they may or may not have comments that have to be addressed, but ultimately they approve the application, then they will send a resolution from their board stating that they've approved it and they're issuing or they're issuing authorization to provide financial assistance to the city. At that point, the city would then have the option to consider the issuance of bonds and the commitment for the project. And once that's done, then you would be entering the planning phase of the project. And at that point, you would be committed to some level of funding. And the planning phase includes acquisition. And remember, you've issued bonds at this point, so there's funding available to be released. Acquisition, environmental assessment, and a final engineering report, and some other administrative items. But the big items there being the environmental, the acquisition, and the final engineering report. So during that time, you're deciding, okay, is this really where we want this to go? Is this the way we want to do this? The scope, in this case, or in the case of the project we're going to be discussing, treatment options will be, there will be a selection made on that. Location, all of that stuff would be finalized in that final report that the city would then approve. Yeah.
And so it does, you are saying the permitting process is part of the planning?
I'm sorry, yes, permitting is.
Okay, I mean, I'm just clarifying that permitting is part of the planning. That's after you've committed to funding, but there's still more steps to go.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, the final engineering, acquisition, environmental, and permitting would be part of that. And so all those selections are made, that final decisions are made on how the project needs to proceed. Council would review and approve that. That would be submitted to the Texas Water Development Board. They would review it, and they would have to issue approval as well. And that would mean the permitting would have to be completed, acquisition would have to be resolved, and of course, the final report. Once the Water Development Board approves that, then they would issue authorization to proceed into the design phase. And so in the design phase, obviously, plans and specs for the project would be completed. Bidding contract documents would be completed, submitted to the city for approval. Once the city gives their approval, they would be submitted to the Texas Water Development Board. The Water Development Board would then have to review and approve the draft or the plans and specs and the draft contract documents. Once they've reviewed it and approved it, then they would issue an authorization to go out for bids. And that's where you're transitioning from the design phase to the construction phase. Obviously, then you would bid the project, you would receive bids, the city would review the bids, award the contract, and then they would send that award to the Texas Water Development Board. TWDB would have to review the award and approve it, then send that back to you with authorization to issue a contract and go to a notice to proceed for construction. So there's 5 phases essentially of this process. At each one of those steps, the Water Development Board has to issue authorization to proceed with releasing any funds for any part of that phase of the project. Each phase has to be completed before they will allow progress into the next phase of the project. So they're very, very stringent about how they allow the release of funds and how they transition from one phase to the other. Let's see if
Hey, real quick, Derek, just clarify Amy's question from earlier. So it's fairly, I mean, we get draws all the time. We get a draw request for X, and that has to be approved by Water Development Board.
Correct.
And if they don't approve that, I mean, HAF or Jacob and Martin or whomever, they have to wait for that process so that gets in that planning phase, right?
Right.
I was talking about our conversation from earlier today.
Right, yeah, I mean, it is possible that somebody would submit an invoice for one reason or the other, either inadvertently or intentionally, for monies that might carry over into another phase, because maybe that work has been completed, which would not be unusual. But the Water Development Board will review it, and they will hold that back. They will not allow release of those funds until that phase is achieved. So, but yes, you do monthly, don't have to be monthly, but at least minimum of, or maximum minimum of monthly outlays that have to be reviewed. So when you go into construction, especially, the engineer would review the outlay request, the city would review the outlay request, and the Water Development Board would have to approve the outlay request before they would release the funds. Those funds would be released to the city, and then the city would have the opportunity to make payment at that point. Does that answer that question?
When did you start all this process?
Specifically, the TWDB clean water process started when we submitted the PIF, which would have been sometime mid last year. And that, again, is just that's an expression of interest that the Water Development Board takes, and then decides whether that project merits being included in their intended use plan for the year. Sometime late in the year, and I don't know exactly when it was, you would have gotten a response from them, a letter basically stating that the TWDB is inviting the city to submit an application for funding. I believe in this case, at that point, went into procurement, because again, there's quite a bit of effort. That's typical of how this works. It doesn't have to be this way, but there's a lot of effort that goes into the preparation of an application, and most of these consultants are not doing this at cost. I mean, they're not doing it for cost. So typically, you want to get the procurement done, which was done in this case, and then work is started on the application. And the first part of that is to draft a resolution and some of the basic information that goes into the application to present to council, which was done, and I believe you guys approved submission of the application, passed the resolution in May.
We weren't given anything. I'm curious about the feasibility study. It's, the cover page is dated June 2020, but the first sentence says that the city authorized the process to begin in February 2020, and all the pages are dated May 2020, the feasibility study.
Okay. The February date is wrong, and this is a preliminary report, and it will be updated and corrected and revised, but the reason I think that is in there is because the original procurement date was going to be February. The notice that went out said in February. That was extended some period of time, and I think it wound up in March, maybe, when that process was completed. So that was anticipated to be in February. The May date is just when some of that work was done.
Well, in the application, I discovered that We put an RFP in the community news on January 10th. Council never ordered that. We didn't know anything about it. And the scope of the work in there in the RFP does not include the planning of a wastewater treatment plant or the application of funds from the CWSFR or FSR, whatever it is, Clean Water Fund. It's not included in the scope of work. I have a copy of it here. It does mention the Clean Water State Revolving Fund in the first paragraph, but under scope of services, it does not mention anything about a wastewater treatment plant.
Because at the time of procurement, we didn't know what the project was going to be.
You didn't know if we were going to be
We didn't
planning a
know if we were going
wastewater
to.
treatment plant.
If you recall, we had several discussions on a wholesale contract or a wastewater treatment plant. We didn't know exactly what it was going to be.
When?
Furthermore, we did the RFP after the IUP came in, just as we did on Fort Worth Water. We followed the exact same process with Fort Worth Water.
And you communicated that to council when? Because I've
With that-
gone through the
So
agendas.
what's the, I'm concerned about what you're accusing. It sounds like you're accusing somebody of something, so what is it?
I'm trying to straighten out the dates here because things are dated. So this RFP, I didn't know anything about it. Found it
Here's the
here.
steps. Tell me which step is not right, or what the problem, and just go down the line here.
I'm going through this application right here, trying to get the timing on when these things were done right, because step number 3 is the city must adopt a resolution authorizing the filing of an application. These documents are all dated May 20th or 21st, and signed by Doyle and signed by everybody, May 20th. And, but the only actions that we took, March 11th, we discussed it in executive session, but we
So-
took no action.
so my question is-
April 14th, council approved using Jacob and Martin, but we only had one briefing page. We weren't provided with any contracts, we weren't provided with any documentation. And then I found in the application that Mayor Moss signed a $670,000 contract with Jacob and Martin. Council never saw that.
So, Mr. Chester, I got a question. Is council required to approve RFPs?
No,
Okay.
just, you mean to go out?
Pardon me?
I mean, just to authorize them to be
Right.
solicited?
Mhm.
No,
What are we required on this list to approve?
you have to approve the people that are hired
Okay,
per the RFP.
okay.
And
And
we,
when
And that's what we did.
The contract with Jacob and Martin that was signed, so that was a preliminary contract for the pending funding then, if we got funding?
Pending funding, yes.
Pending
Right.
funding under the procurement ad that went into the community
Okay,
news
and
in
council would have to
January.
approve that before it was executed.
But that contract is null and void until council either ratifies it or accepts it.
Okay.
then,
Which will
Or
be.
if the Water
which-
Development Board does not approve.
Yeah,
So,
with the
and
water
this is
bill, yeah,
all,
exactly.
and this is all in compliance with TWDB requirements? Okay. And
why was it signed without council seeing it?
because we don't have to.
That doesn't make any sense.
You will ratify, you will have an opportunity to approve or disapprove that contract on
Because-
July 28th at a regular meeting.
By signing this without council approval,
He hasn't done
part,
anything. He
part
hasn't-
of this,
He hasn't bound you to anything. That contract, that signature has no weight, no authority, no bearing until two things happen. One, the city council approves that contract, and two, the Water Development Board approves that contract.
and so if council
And
does
that
not.
won't happen until the application has been decided on by the Texas Water Development Board, which will be 4 months from now. And then you have to issue debt to make that contract applicable, per the rules of the procurement ad, per the scope of work.
So all the work that he's done preparing the application and whatnot, and it's listed here in the contract that $205,000 worth is for all the preliminary work and that it's doing a lump sum. I emailed you and asked you, okay, how much is all this costing us? And you said, it's not costing us anything. However, on page 130, the preliminary engineering application cost is listed as $55,000. Contract here It says planning services are $205,000. Page 140, preliminary engineering is listed at $50,000. You told me it's free, so which one is true?
If we don't get funded, there will be no charge to the city.
And what will happen, Pat, if council refuses to ratify this application?
We've already approved the application. You're talking about the contract?
Excuse me, yes, the contract.
Yeah, no, if the contract wasn't approved, then it would no money. That would mean we would have to re-procure these services if we're going to go forward with this loan.
The effort that we've put in so far for the application is at our risk, and that's always the way it is. If you decide not to pay it, then we won't
And that was
pay
the
it.
same thing we did with the water system, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
How was all this application process done? We did before June 9th, because we did
Staff
not,
put that together. We don't need to be in every step of the process. We're not required to.
well, the item briefing sheet read that, let's see, that we would, where is it? Essentially, that we would, here it is. Consider all matters, So, staff and the mayor didn't have authorization to do take all these steps.
I disagree.
So
What are you accusing
when-
people of?
when did we-
Spit it out. What are you accusing somebody of doing? I want specifics.
I'm trying to line up the dates. There were things done. The mayor can't sign a contract. I don't care that we
Where
don't.
does it say that? Is that
It
true?
doesn't depend on,
Well, excuse me. Item number 6 was discuss the permit application. Derek's gave us a good presentation. If you wanted to start this discussion later on, we'll continue it later on. I think your questions have been answered, and it's repetitive now. So we're going to move on to item number 7.
I do have one question and a comment. I would say that explaining this application process earlier, January, March, going into that, we could have requested it. It would have been helpful to go through this entire process.
But we have been through it in the water system, so it's not like this is our first rodeo on this.
Understood. Some of us weren't involved in the water system, namely, Nathan was not, I was not at the beginning of the water system. So to understand that a little more explanation at the beginning would be helpful. I will also say there were documents that could have been made available to us at the last council meeting that were already prepared and then submitted. That would have been helpful to have those documents, the feasibility study that was submitted as part of the permit application.
That was not.
It was not available.
That was not done at that.
At the June meeting, I believe.
Okay, that understood then.
Are you?
There were parts of it that had been worked.
Parts of the
but it was
application
not
had been
complete.
worked on. Okay, understood. And I have a final technical question, if we could. As we go to the permitting, you mentioned that is in the planning phase. So TCEQ must fully approve a permit application before we go to the final design phase to get funding from the water board?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yes,
Full
you're right.
permit approval is required before we're committed to final design.
Where are we at in the Fort Worth water in this phase? We're still
sorry?
we're still in planning, right?
Still in planning, yes.
Yeah. And we were funded in September or October?
About that time frame, I think.
Yeah. So this is not an overnight process. This is not private funding. I think that's important to know. Even after you issue the debt, the state still controls all draws. So it's not like we get the money, put it in an account, and then we pay it out as it goes. The state will oversee this. The state will approve every single draw application. And, you started Fort Worth Water sometime in 2018. Here we are in 2020, 2 years later, and we're still in planning on this thing, and you still got design to do. And so this is not a overnight process. This is a long, tedious process. That's the way the state does it. But the benefit is you get a very reduced interest rate, and your long-term upside is bigger than your short side, your short-term growing pains.
So it's a long, tedious process. You started really fast with an ambiguous RFP that you didn't inform council about and didn't bring any information to us other than, hey, we're moving forward with this.
We have a
That's-
professional staff that knows what they're doing, and so we don't need to oversee every step of the process. We are involved, or we are required to be involved by law. And if that's not acceptable, then you need to take that up with your legislature.
It's,
The public would like to know.
the public needs to know, and these are tax dollars, one way or the other. We need to know what's going on. This has been,
They put
this
out
has been
reports,
rushed,
and they've been
this has been
updated.
rushed through.
It has
It
not
has
been.
not been rushed through, it's been a year.
Derek, thank you. Thank you, Derek.
I haven't known about it for a year.
Well, that's another issue.
Well, actually, we did request
Yes.
that staff work on it exactly a
Granbury.
year ago at Granbury. That was
But
our
we
number 2
never,
priority.
we never talked about
Thank
this
you, Derek.
RFP.
Item number 7, wastewater treatment options. We have some letters that Ms. Smith is going to read for us, please.
Bear with
Then,
me, I have
then we have 4 speakers. I'm sorry?
I have 8 letters, and I have another speaker.
Okay.
The first one is David McClendon, 340 Buena Vista, Willow Park. Presently, the existing treatment facility has 800 connections and serves a population of approximately 2,800, or 1/3 of the city, based on 3.5 persons per connection. The service connection projections for 2030 appear to assume that the entire city will be sewered to the newly proposed sewer plant treatment plant. I apologize. If the scenario is the case, then why aren't the subsequent infrastructure improvements included in the total cost for the proposed treatment plant? If this is not the case, then it is reasonable to surmise that the 2030 future connections projections would be closer to 1,260 and not 2,156 connections presented in the engineering report. 1,260 connections would yield an average sewer loading demand of 0.349 MGD. If this case were low by 40%, then Willow Park would approach maximum average daily capacity in 2030. Furthermore, the alternative analysis need to be evaluated with respect to fixed capital and variable operating costs over the life cycle of the capital improvement, i.e. 20 years or 50 years. In other words, how much will each alternative cost the city over time? It does not appear the projections and alternatives have been reviewed and explained in sufficient detail to proceed with a funding permit or property acquisition. Capacity with the existing system is not an immediate problem. We, as residents and taxpayers of Willow Park, deserve the best plan and negotiated deal, but not necessarily the first. The second is Fred McCulley, 433 Crown Road, Willow Park. Mr. Mayor and council members, I believe the city is rushing into a major decision with the relocation of a new wastewater location. The current sewer plant is only operation at less than 50% capacity. There is ample time to pursue other options long term. Our small community does not have the ideal location without imposing on our population or surrounding communities. Would anyone seated here tonight like to have the plant in their backyard? As Fort Worth rapidly moves west, they will bring sewer and water with the development. It appears the city has several years' worth of use at the current plant and ample time to budget and negotiate with Fort Worth for our expansion and future sewer needs. As I understand it, there are an estimated 800 connections to the system today. Even if that number doubles in the near term, it does not appear the burden of debt for a new location can be justified. The next one is from Carolyn and Jerry Thompson, 439 Quail Ridge Road. We are strongly opposed to the location of the proposed Willow Park sewage treatment facility and the location of the proposed discharge point. The discharge point appears to be located on either on our property or on our next door neighbor's property, both of which are outside the Willow Park city limits. The proposed facility lies in a floodplain that has flooded many times in the past 30 years we have owned our land. Part of our property lies in the same floodplain, and I have witnessed water covering our entire bottom acreage after a massive rain event. The environmental damage should the sewer treatment facility overflow is a disaster waiting to happen. We do not live within the city limits of Willow Park, thus have no voice in determining if this project goes forward. However, dumping your sewage discharge downstream outside of the city limits displays arrogance and a disregard of those living near Willow Park. Excuse me. The next letter is from Dustin DeMoss, to whom it may concern. Please accept this email as evidence of my opposition to a poorly planned and rushed proposition to install a wastewater treatment plant in the growing populace of Willow Park. This project has demonstrated little regard as to the potential environmental impact in an already jeopardized community environment and has the potential to affect residents of not only Willow Park, but other surrounding municipalities as well. I would like to see a motion to table this project until which time a full environmental impact study can be performed so the stakeholders of this community, its residents, can have the opportunity to make a fully informed decision as to the future of their city and immediate environment. I apologize. The next one is from Kay Collier. First, why is this expedient decision to build a new sewage waste plant? Second, how will this benefit those who have septic systems? Third, is this not a decision to be made from the whole community and not from a select few? Next, Kathy Kinney, 138 Muirfield, Willow Park. As a 30-year resident of Willow Park, I am making the following comments in regard to the proposed new sewage plant location. I am not happy with the direction our city is taking, in my opinion. Making deals with developers and landowners by city government is unacceptable. Our city council was truly kept in the dark on these maneuvers. We have a fairly new city sewage plant already in place that is not even at 50% capacity. $17 million to relocate makes no sense at all. What's the big rush to push this through? This small city can't handle a huge new debt load. I am hoping others will speak up about this also and convince our city council that this is not in our city's best interest. One more thing, this move will impact residents outside of Willow Park who have absolutely no voice in this, yet a huge impact to the enjoyment of their property. We should be a good neighbor to them. Please, council, do what we elected you to do. Listen to the citizens. Please do the right thing. Brian Grimes' job is to take direction from our elected mayor and council. If you fellas, shame on you. The next one is Barbara Bailey. My name is Barbara Bailey, and I live on Quail Ridge Road in the town of North Annetta. I am appalled to see that your members are trying to approve a sewer discharge area within North Annetta city limits. How can this decision even be debatable, as you have no rights to that land? This decision-making process is especially concerning since many residents don't feel comfortable coming to a meeting where they can be subject to getting the COVID-19 virus. My request is that you stop the vote on this decision and do not move forward with the current plans. The next one is Kristen Campbell. As a resident of Annetta North, it greatly troubles me that the city of Willow Park would choose a location for their sewage plant that will discharge directly into our small town. We are on a well and take great pains to ensure the highest quality of water for our family. I am concerned about the effects this facility will have on the environment as well as the impact on our property value. I am also concerned about noxious fumes that could be regularly dispensed into the air as our home sits above the discharge point. Another great concern is the proximity to TCA and the potential health hazard this could pose on our youth participating in athletics on adjacent fields. My family and I view Willow Park as an extension of our community. We shop in Willow Park. Our kids have attended school in Willow Park. We eat out in Willow Park. Not to mention we have family and friends who call Willow Park home. It is in our neighborhood. As such, I hope that Willow Park realizes the opportunity to be a good neighbor to the town of Annetta North and pay for the city of Fort Worth, who have the means and ways to remove the waste. And that's it.
Thank you. We have 5 speakers. Mr. Dave Henson. Please state your name and address, please, at the podium. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Henson.
I won't take that long.
Okay.
Mayor, council members, appreciate this minute to speak. once again, I was kind of in the forefront, or within the forefront of the 2014, 2015 fiasco for a wastewater treatment plant. Okay? This book right here is all the notes that I took. Mainly it could come from Neverdowski, Shaftstall's, Willow Park memos. It came from the Weatherford Democrat. It came from the deal. So the people that are saying this is a brand new Rush deal are wrong. This is actually our first Willow Park endeavor. It resulted in a lawsuit in 2007 for funds not paid by the city of Willow Park. It was settled to Willow Park's detriment in 2015. So this is not new. We've been fighting a sewer treatment plant since the 20 years that I've lived here. And a lot of this stuff I didn't know about. I got it out of the Weatherford Democrat. So when I got involved in this in 2015, they were going to put the water treatment plant behind my house, below the golf course, because the golf course wanted to buy the effluent water. I looked at some of the engineering studies. Kingsgate was a feasible deal. Our engineering firm has got articles in here about what they did. Never once was it ever brought up south of Interstate 20, because at the time when we were discussing this, the city attorney's family owned property south of Interstate 20. So it was untouchable. So now, here we are in 2020, 5 years later, and we still do not have a site picked out, period. And the acreage that we actually have for the existing water treatment plant, if you can get one $500,000 or gallon a day plant, so will the other one. So you take out the old one, which isn't being used, put it right in there, you have your million gallons a day that we're striving for, without all this rigmarole. That plant cost the city $2.5 million, the new one. So why not incur $2.5 million more instead of the 17 or 15 or 10 that everybody else is talking about, just to move it down the road? It's just economically unfeasible. Even the projections they did into 2040, back in 2007, they had right about 15,000 people is what Willow Park would actually handle. That we've built to our limits. Okay, we're at 5,000 now, and we still have 20 more years to go. So all I'm saying is, if you get another 500,000 gallon wastewater treatment plant beside, leave it there. It'll save you a lot of heartache in the long run. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. David Sweeney. State your name and address, please.
My name is David Sweeney. I live at 421 Quail Ridge Road. Our family also owns land at 417 Quail Ridge Road. Please bear with me. It's the first time I've ever spoken to City Council. I'm a 35-year resident of this community. Been here all my life. The current plan, from the pictures that I've seen, has y'all's discharge line, over half of it going through our property. I grew up running around down there. My kids grow up running around down there right now. Somebody wrote a letter a little while back that you read about, why don't you put it in your own city? Shows the arrogance. I completely agree with that. I don't know if that's like y'all's final plan or what. I just know that I've seen it. I wasn't very prepared for this because I only heard about it a couple days ago. But, you know, there's environmental concerns. Somebody talked about it being in the floodplain. I've been on that floodplain for 35 years. I've seen it 12 foot deep. What are you going to do when that thing floods and it's 12 foot deep and floods everybody's land downstream with raw sewage? You know, and then I also think about when I drive over Interstate 30 headed into Dallas in the middle of summer. You know how bad that stinks? Everybody here's done it. It reeks. Is my land going to end up smelling like that? I think there's a lot more discussion that needs to go into this about y'all's site and where y'all are going to put it. The gentleman before me talked about Squaw Creek wanting to buy the water to water their golf course with. Why don't y'all just run that discharge line north into your own city and dump it into the lake in Squaw Creek, and they can water the golf course with it? It doesn't make any sense to me why you would dump your treated sewage into another city's land without even discussing it with that other city or giving that other city the option to talk to their residents about it and figure out how they want to handle it. And like I said, I know this is very, very preliminary, but I've only seen one map of what's been proposed, and I haven't seen any alternatives. It sounds to me like y'all are in discussions with Fort Worth to help get water out here. And is that the case, the Fort Worth Water Project? Yeah. Well, like I said, I've been a resident for 35 years out here, and all I've ever heard about is the problems with Willow Park's water system. So y'all are going to Fort Worth to get water now, which is going to greatly benefit this city. If y'all can't run just a simple city water system getting water to people's houses, what makes y'all think that y'all are going to be able to manage a hazardous biological waste facility? Why don't y'all just get Fort Worth to bring a sewer line in when they bring in their water line and do it the right way instead of dumping it on another city's property? And I guess that's really all I got to say. I don't agree with it, and it's not right.
Thank you. Mr. Christian Ellis.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. I live at 415 Quill Ridge Road. I'm your neighbor. Like some of the people that wrote you, I eat in your town. I have a lot of friends and neighbors in your town, and go to people's houses for dinner in your town. And we're neighbors, and I think we're all in it together. I want to talk to you about this. This is obviously shocking to all of us. We saw it on Nextdoor, saw it by internet. Lots of intrigue surrounding it, lots of rumor and innuendo. I'm not here to talk about any of that. I think that's outside the scope of what is my business for right now. I do want to talk to you about a few things. I have a law firm in Fort Worth. We do a lot of construction. We help a lot of engineers, represent a lot of engineers, deal with a lot of development. I read plans like this all the time. And first of all, in reading it, I am concerned about the assumptions being made by Jacob Martin in the June 2020 report. I think that the assumptions may well be overreaching. They're talking about a 40% increase in users over the next 20 years, but an over 500% increase in needed gallons per day, or million gallon per day. That doesn't seem to make sense to me at all. It assumes annexation. That's in the report. Those words are in the report. I don't know of any annexation motions or annexation actions that are being taken by the city. And it talks about exponential growth in a situation to where really likely the only way that growth is going to happen is by higher density and potentially multifamily residences. You know, my parents live in Arlington, and I can tell you that was a move that Arlington has long regretted and will regret for a very, very, very long time. And so I don't know that you really want to grow as much as the projections talk about. And even if you do, I think that the requirements set out in the report are greatly exaggerated, as pointed out by the first letter read this evening. The second issue is pollution, and it's significant. I got on the Journal of Environmental and Public Health. They published a study on June 7th of 2016. It's on hindawi.com, hindawi.com. And what they did is they studied the quality of life of people living close to a municipal wastewater treatment plant. I will live within half a mile of this plant. And they surveyed and tested hundreds of inhabitants around the plant. They talked about significant risks for symptoms such as headache, tiredness, concentration difficulties, increased possibility for respiratory, which is kind of a bad problem these days, increase of respiratory problems, skin diseases, mood changes, significantly higher gastrointestinal symptoms were also reported. The prevalence of pathogenic airborne microorganisms originating from the wastewater treatment plant was reported in high numbers in the sampling points. This is not a no harm, no foul plant. It's just not. And it's not even talking about the significant, there was another study I found today, significant complaints about odor pertaining to these plants. Significant. And there are technologies certainly being employed to eliminate some of the aerosols and things like that, but it's very expensive. And I seriously doubt that the cost estimates set forth in this plan even take that into account at all, because they're certainly not mentioned. You also have to look at the fact that that land around there, yes, it's a little bit remote right now. Not remote to me, it's within a half a mile, but it's a little bit remote right now, but that's not always going to be the case. There's going to be homes there. Willow Park homes, because city property is around there somewhere, you're going to erode your tax base. Not to mention the fact that you have TCA right next door. Church, school, kids. That's going to be serious. And so it has significant problems. Last thing I want to talk about, cost. Is it $14 million or $17 million? The June 2020 report issued by Jacob and Martin says $14.133 million. The report that I saw today, posted by Councilwoman Fennell, says $17 million. And that's the report being cited in these letters. I don't know where that comes from, but that's pretty expensive. And when you get to $17 million, you start getting above the cost for connecting to other cities. These wastewater plants already exist by other cities, with other cities that you all can connect to, and for less than the $17 million being talked about here. And that's not including the environmental challenges that will be filed, the legal challenges that will be filed.
Thank you.
And all the things that will happen. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
Next speaker is Ms. Marcy Galley.
Move on.
Only the 30-second warning light.
She's on her way. She's outside.
Who's
Hi, and thanks, Mayor and Council, for letting me speak. Why is the city requesting a 17...
Name and address, please.
Oh, Marcy Galley, 500 Squaw Creek Road.
Okay.
Why is the city requesting a $17 million loan before we know what TCEQ will allow? Sorry, I'm out of breath because I was in the parking lot. We have a brand new sewer plant built in 2018 that cost just under $2 million and is processing all of our wastewater at 47% of the permitted capacity. The old plant is not being used and could be torn down and replaced with another new 5 MGD sewer plant. The current footprint for both plants is just over half of an acre. There are 1.63 acres of usable space per a 2017 siting summary. If 1 MGD can be produced on just over half an acre, how can the current property not support a future 2 MGD plant? The feasibility study includes proposed improvements for land application, and this would require a tertiary treatment, so post-secondary. Derek included $500K for a UV disinfection post-treatment. Current labs show dissolved oxygen levels at 7.5, and that's without UV disinfection. How could we improve our effluent at the current location in order to actually improve the impaired segment of the Clear Fork Trinity? Our system is currently producing 234,000, and the TCEQ requires a planning phase of 75%, or 375,000. If each connection uses 277 gallons per day per the May feasibility study, we have room to bring on 509 connections at 75% and 270 connections by the time we reach 90. An additional 779 connections can be added to the system before we are required to break ground on a larger facility. If we have the ability to tie into the Marys Creek sewer plant, we should do our best to try and negotiate that deal, or hire Halfin Associates again to negotiate on our behalf. If current daily flows are around 234,000, with most of Meadow Place developed, and we are still below the 288,000 projected 2020 usage, also per the feasibility study, there is plenty of time to promote regional discussions and hold public forums. Again, we are at 234,000 right now. It is unethical to move our sewer plant to a location immediately surrounded by residents that do not require sewer service. The main area needing support for increased sewer capacity is the TERS area, and that is where the plant should remain until a wholesale contract can be agreed upon. And I do believe we have the time to wait. The very last thing we should be doing is dumping our sewer waste in our neighbors' backyards in Annetta. And I've fought this fight since late 2015. And I cannot believe I'm standing here again saying the same exact things, even sitting over there at the dais, saying the same things in 2017 too. I think the TWDB application should be rescinded. The engineering contract should not have been signed on May 1 when you didn't have the authority to sign it per the city council. That's a no-go. It should be rescinded. We need public forums, and we definitely need to be good neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton Hartley, I'm not know if I'm pronouncing that correct. Hartley, thank you.
Sorry, could you give the name?
Clayton Hartley.
Hi, my name's Clayton Hartley. Sorry, I'm not very eloquent as some of these guys prior to me. I represent my family's holdings there on Quail Ridge, from 705 Quail Ridge over to 1281 Jenkins Road. We currently have a cow-calf operation there that we run. We grow wholesome grass-fed beef. We sell to the public. We've been doing it we've been there almost 25 years. And we're deeply concerned with y'all's idea of pumping sewage just upstream in our creek. Our cattle eat and drink out of our creek. That creek spills over in our floodplain where we grow coastal grass that our cattle eat. That creek spills over into our neighbor's floodplain where they grow coastal hay that we buy every year, where we feed our cattle and keep them alive through the winter. On the other side, that creek spills over in the floodplain right there below the original settlement of H.J. Hood, which is one of the original 4 settlers of Parker County. His cabin still stands there this day. His family cemetery is right there on the edge of that floodplain as well. I know the law says it's illegal for y'all to pipe that sewage in over there in our creek in our city without our permission. But I don't think it's right for our animals to have to eat and drink it. I don't think it's morally right, ethically right. I sure hope you guys will reconsider your decision and try to be a good neighbor to your surrounding communities as you'd want us to be a good neighbor to y'all. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Our last speaker is Mr. Vaughn Morris.
Thank y'all. My name's Vaughn Morris. I live at 621 Squaw Creek Road. Been a resident here for 29 years. Been a resident of Parker County my whole life, and so is my wife. Maybe a little premature on this, but what I really wanted to come and get on record with, I guess, is if we ever decide to do a water treatment plant, I'm representing CERA, Corporate Employees Recreation Association, and we have an interest in, like one of the other gentlemen said, making use of some of the effluent that comes out. It's a very well-known, well-documented thing that's a good thing to irrigate golf courses with. And we haven't had any issues with the irrigation since the drought broke, but that doesn't mean another drought's not going to come, you know, in time. They generally do. So all I want to do is if and when, or if we leave the treatment plant there where it's at, we would like to obtain some of the effluent in order to put in the lake, or we may have to do, we've talked to the TECQ before, I have, and what they recommended is that we get with y'all and work out an agreement, and in the process of y'all doing your permitting for whatever you decide to do, you know, wherever you decide to put it, that we work in conjunction with you permitting to get a authorization for reuse permit, so we could use on an on-demand basis, basically, whenever we needed some makeup water in order to keep the golf course irrigated. So I'm the representative for CERA for that. So when y'all get ready to do things, please contact me, or I'll stay in contact with you however we need to do that. And we'd love to work with you on any of this to try to obtain some of the effluent water to help irrigate the golf course. So that's.
Thank you, Vaughn.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Grimes, anything else?
Do we have any more comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Derek, can you?
Okay, so last time, or in May, last time I was here talking about this, I was asked to prepare a report and bring a presentation to you guys about the different disposal options that had been looked at and were being looked at, and follow up with some of the conversations that had been had and verify some things, and to tie down some of that information for you guys. There's been a lot of questions about an array of topics that some of this presentation I've got today will cover as well, but for the most part it's going to be geared toward the disposal options and what we found, and kind of a follow up on what we've talked about before. First thing I'd like to do is just some of the factors that we considered, or maybe the main ones, related to the evaluation of these sites had to do with the discharge location, obviously, the availability of property and the surrounding conditions of that property, the timing and the time it would take to implement these things, depending on where you're at or what kind of option you select, and then the capacity and the projections. And I just want to take a minute. I know you're all, this idea of the impaired stream segment has been a pretty hot topic lately, and so I want to discuss that a little bit. So the EPA maintains a list, they call it a 303D list, of streams throughout the country that are considered to be impaired, and the way that they determine that is the state agency, in this case the TCEQ, monitors these streams, all the perennial streams in Texas, on a quarterly basis. And so if any of a slew of parameters, dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, any other whole list of other potential items, fail to meet a certain threshold that's considered safe for aquatic uses, recreational uses, and other things, then it's considered impaired and put on the list. In this case, the area between Weatherford Dam to a point about 2 miles south of the interstate was listed on that 303D list some time ago. And it was mainly because of dissolved oxygen levels. It was reduced dissolved oxygens weren't as high as they needed to be. And so it was put on the list. recently, and I'm going to go ahead and just, I'm going to go ahead and hit this real quick. This is a map off the EPA 303D website. This shows where the impaired stream is, and if you look, you see Lake Weatherford up at the top. I-20 is kind of the yellow banded line going across the middle. That red line that zigzags down where the river is what they currently show on their website as the impaired stream segment. We know that the area between I-20 and Weatherford Dam has recently been delisted. So the impaired segment, I've circled it in red where the actual currently listed impaired segment of the stream is. So you can see where that is.
Wait, Derek, you're saying that the section from Lake Weatherford to I-20 has been delisted?
That's correct.
Could you discharge in that?
No, I'm getting it.
Okay.
So, but the TCEQ, and we've had several conversations, and after the last time we talked back in May, I've had numerous conversations with them, but we've discussed that issue specifically. And they'd already told us that it was very unlikely that any additional discharges would be allowed in the impaired stream segment or upstream of the impaired stream segment, because whatever we put upstream is going to wind up downstream and make its way into that impaired stream. And they do modeling and different things in addition to the quarterly monitoring to determine these things. But this is not them. We don't have anything in writing from them saying, okay, this is where you're at, this will not happen. But we've got pretty significant input from them that they are not going to permit a discharge in those locations based on what they know about the levels in the stream, upstream and in the impaired stream. So the options then are to find some way to, if you're going to increase your discharge, find some way to get it to another location or go to a zero discharge. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But as far as the discharge itself, that location approximately 2 miles south as the river runs of the interstate is where that impaired stream segment ends, and that's where they've told us that we would have an option to discharge. Your current discharge, the 500,000 gallons a day that you currently discharge, can be renewed. They're not going to take that away from you. They've indicated that they will renew that permit. Anything above and beyond that, though, they've pretty well flatly told us that we're going to have to look for another option there. So I wanted to go through that a little bit. The other thing that's been talked about quite a bit is the capacity of the plant you have, where the plant is at as far as in relation to that capacity and what the projections look like. So I wanted to go through that a little bit. There's already been some talk. Some people have discussed the requirements pretty accurately, but I want to go ahead and reiterate that because it's going to lead into some other things. But your permit with the TCEQ, the permit that the TCEQ issued for the plant you currently have, the 500,000 gallons a day, has two requirements in it. The first one is that if the actual flow at the plant exceeds 75% of the rated capacity, the 500,000 gallons a day, on an average basis for 3 consecutive months, that's every day of the month averaged out for 3 months, exceeds that 75%, then you have to immediately initiate design of a new of a upgrade or a enhancement or some other option to address the additional capacity that you need. The second requirement is that if the plant exceeds 90% of the rated capacity for 3 consecutive months on an average basis, then you have to immediately initiate a request for approval to start construction of an upgrade or an enhancement. So just to give you an idea of where the plant actually is right now, and in the next slide I'll show a little more that I'm going to go into, but this just kind of gives you a little bit of information. I went back to January of 2018, so roughly 2.5 years, and looked at the plant flows from that time to now, to the end of June or middle of July, and looked at the average day flows. And since that January 2018 date, the plant has exceeded that 75% capacity requirement 72 times, 72 individual days. Okay, that's not the 3-month requirement, but it's just individual days. And the plant has exceeded 90% of that capacity, rated capacity, 43 days in that period of time. So your plant has exceeded that level on a number of occasions. That's really just kind of anecdotal, but this next one is a little more to the point. And the plant has exceeded 75% of capacity on a monthly average. That's 1 month average based on daily flows. 3 times since that January 2018. So if that happens 3 months in a row, then you're out of compliance. So that's the point there. But you're not currently.
Speaker, a couple of times back here, she said that we were at 50% capacity, so that's not.
I'm gonna go into that, yeah.
Okay.
So, but you haven't exceeded the 3-month threshold for 75%. That's just 3 months out of those 2.5 years.
Derek, does I&I play any impact into these numbers?
Yeah, your high periods are gonna be your wet weather times.
Yep.
And that's gonna be the way it is wherever you're at. No matter, you can improve it, but you're gonna have higher flows during wetter periods.
How many days have we had in the last year, 2019? Because I know we did some improvements to drainage.
Well, there was.
That helped the flow, because when we have the high rain days, the capacity is high.
I can get you the breakdown. I have a breakdown, I don't have it readily available, but in 2019, you were around 40-something days over the 75%. I think 22 or 28 over the 90%.
Is it possible that these are falsely elevated?
Excuse me. This is just a presentation. There's no questions from the audience.
So I wanted to go through, so that's the 3 months out of that 2.5-year period. I went back to look to just see on a 3-month, on your highest 3-month period, or throughout that period, what you're actually were seeing as a percentage, since it wasn't 75%. So I went back and reviewed and found that you've exceeded, you're very near or exceeding 65% of the plant capacity on a 3-month period, a 3-month window. That's 3 consecutive months, 3 times during that 2.5-year period. So that doesn't do a lot other than just kind of tell you where that plant capacity actually is, because it's not your 365-day average, which is what I'm going to go into shortly. It's that highest 3-month period that's critical in compliance, okay? So if you look at I did this table earlier this year, and I've updated it recently with 2020 figures. If you look at that 2019 number, the average flow over 365 days last year was 264,000 gallons per day. That's your average 365-day flow at that plant in 2019, okay? The sewer connection column, the second column there after the year, that includes about 90% of the permitted development that the city currently has. That's development that's either under construction or soon to be under construction. So that projection, that 1,415 connections, is roughly 90. That includes your existing connections and roughly about 90% of the permitted development that you're going to see. And so, and then based on your daily flow per connection, your multiplication factor, you see in 2019 it was 0.23 gallons per minute per customer per day. That's just an average number. But so far in 2020, that's been about 0.245. So I carried that number through the projection period as a calculator to make a projection of what your average flow would be in 2023, 3 years from now. So with the projected development, and that's roughly 638 living unit equivalents. It's actually 440-ish actual connections, individual connections that would be added to the system. But based on that multiplier and that meter connection or connection projection, you're at 489,000 gallons per day. That's an average. And this is your 365-day average. So you're not your actual average projection is much higher than what's being said. And it could be higher than that, it could be lower, but just keep in mind that that is not your high 3-month consecutive month time. That's a 365-day average. And that's based on known connections. That's connections you currently have in the ground and the ones that are under construction now.
So we've approved development that we can't provide services to after 2023? Is that what you're saying?
No, you can provide service. You're under the 500,000
Well,
it's under the
up to-
500,000 gallon a day threshold. That's just
The
meaning that.
average daily flow, though, you said, sometimes.
Yeah, but that's what the plan
We're
is designed based
required
on.
to start
Yeah.
the process
Right.
because of that.
This is a trigger.
Once we get the trigger of the 75%, we have to be in design.
So, get on to the disposal option discussion. As you recall, we've looked at a number of different options. We looked at at a new plant at various sites. We talked about wholesale contracts with other entities, and at the last meeting, again, we were asked to go back and look at a permanent plant option at various locations, which we looked at, and then in particular, 3 wholesale arrangements with local entities, and really the only feasible ones. These are the 3 entities that have treatment capacity or capabilities within a proximity of Willow Park that would make it practical to look at. These are the sites that we looked at as far as the new plant possibilities. One is obviously the existing site. You've got the TERS location, a site at Kingsgate, which is just by the Kingsgate lift station, and then the site south of I-20 that we've looked at. So as far as examining the cost of these options, we looked at a 1 MGD plant. Irrigation is something we want to discuss, but in order to keep everything apples to apples, we did not look at irrigation as far as costing was concerned. We do have information on that we're going to go over, but for the purposes of this comparison, it's a 1 MGD plant, similar operations as far as what's being done. Contract with Aledo, and we went back again after this last meeting that we discussed this. We've had discussion with each one of these entities. We talked to Aledo, and Aledo is really early in their planning process, and they just don't have any information yet to really provide a lot of information on, and I think it's going to be a while before they get to that point. They haven't done any real hard or significant work in moving that planning process along yet, as far as I know, and that's the indication we've gotten from them. We have some very high-level cost information based on what they think it's going to cost them to upgrade their plant, and based on the capacity that we're talking about. We're able to make a projection based on that. And then the cost of conveying the wastewater effluent from Willow Park to Aledo, our estimate on that would be $15.78 million. Fort Worth, we've had quite a bit of conversation with, and they do have a pretty good bit of information. They're pretty well along in their process for building a new plant at Mary's Creek. And so we contacted them. We had discussions previously about what they thought the buy-in cost would be, and we followed up on that and asked them to confirm that the numbers that we understood were correct. And based on the cost that they're projecting for their plant and the capacity of that plant, they're telling us that it would be a $13 million buy-in for Willow Park to buy into that Mary's Creek treatment plant. It's in the neighborhood of 8.5, 9 miles of transmission line that would be required. So when you add that cost in, the estimate for that was $21.58 million. Weatherford, we've had a lot of discussion with them as well, and they actually procured a study by their engineers to determine what the buy-in specifically for Willow Park would be, and provided that to us. That was some time ago, but we followed up after the last meeting and asked them to confirm that our understanding of those numbers were correct and that they were still the numbers to use. And they said they were. And so the way they broke it out is they had an immediate buy-in of a little over $9 million. And then
Was it 19 or 9?
There's more. Okay. And then within the first 10-year period, the additional buy-in would be covered as well, which was another $9.5 million. So the total buy-in for Willow Park to Weatherford, based on that information, was a little over $19 million. They also indicated this to me before, and then they reiterated it when they sent us a written response, that in addition to that, they believe there should be an existing facility buy-in and upfront impact fee numbers as well. They don't have numbers for that, so we don't have numbers for that, but it would be something in addition to the 19 million buy-in.
So they're saying a new plant that we'd have to participate in?
No, that's what the 19 million is. They're saying their existing facilities that they already have in the ground, they believe there should be some buy-in there. Don't know what that number would be, and there would obviously be a negotiation there, but.
So these estimates, what capacity is that?
1 MGD.
1 MGD.
1 million gallons per day.
Oh, I see, right above, sorry.
And so when you factor in the transmission cost to get from Willow Park to Weatherford, the projection on that's $24.9 million. So that gets us to the new plant option and the different sites that we looked at. And each one of these sites was evaluated with costs specifically for a plant at that site to build a new plant there. And in this case, we looked at running that effluent down the river to the closest location we could get to where the TCEQ would likely allow us to discharge. That is something that we took the shortest route to get to the closest point we could get to make a recommendation to the city. This is something you guys have to evaluate, and it'll have to be put through the paces and the final engineering study that has to be done. But that's what we looked at for these numbers. The existing site, based on that, and it's the furthest away from that location, would be $14.67 million. That's for the cost of the plant and the transmission. The TERS site would be $16.14, and by the way, these include the information that we have on potential property acquisition cost as well. The Kingsgate site was 14.158, and the south of I-20 site was 14.13. So this table is pretty lengthy. I'm not sure you want me to go through every item of this, but it basically lays out a lot of the different advantages and disadvantages of each option. Obviously, the cost. The cost is broken out a little differently because I've broken out some of the acquisition parts, and I've also added some irrigation information in case you wanted to irrigate. The irrigation option is vastly different depending on the site you choose. The cost to get there, the type of soils, the type of vegetation, how do you store it? I mean, there's a lot of variations. The area available for buffer. So it's really hard to put a number to that without having a pretty good idea of where the site is. So that's mainly piping and pumping costs that I've included, but it kind of gives you an idea of what those costs might look like. The ability to discharge up to 1 MGD, which is what we're shooting for. Obviously, on the wholesale side, that would be something that would be negotiated. If you increased above the 1 MGD, obviously there would be a cost, a buy-in involved with that. The existing site, the discharge is limited to 0.5 MGD at that point, at that location because of the impaired stream. You would have the same situation with the TERS. Although at the TERS, there's not a discharge location adjacent to the site. So all of the discharge from that location would have to be pumped somewhere. So the cost on that includes pumping half of that to some location near where you currently discharge or at Crown Road, the closest location to the river. And then the rest of it would have to go downstream to the closest available location. Kingsgate, you could discharge the current amount at that location in the river, but you'd have to pump the rest. And then at the south of I-20, have the same situation. You'd have to pump half of it downstream. The ability to use irrigation, and I'm assuming this is irrigation facilities or property owned by the city, which is always the better alternative when you're talking about irrigation. But At the existing site, there's not enough property around the plant site to really make irrigation feasible. You would have to pipe it somewhere to get that, to make that happen at that location. At the TERS site, there is quite a bit of currently undeveloped property around the Bluffs area. Obviously, that's being considered for development, probably at a premium. The property would be at a premium. It's still, I believe it's around 25 acres, not positive, but about that number, but it's still pretty low. I think you're probably looking at a minimum of 40 acres to really make it a feasible proposition to get any benefit out of it. Probably need more acres than that to irrigate all of the property. Kingsgate, there's not any property around it. It's pretty well isolated as far as that goes. There's some property across the river that might be used, but again, I think it may be less than 10 acres, so it doesn't meet the need there either. The location south of the interstate is a total of 56 acres, and at least 45 of that, maybe more depending on how big your footprint of your plant is, could be used for irrigation. So it's got some possibility. The cost to discharge out of the impaired stream, obviously that's just a function of the distance and the amount of piping that you have to put in. The existing site being the furthest away, the south of I-20 being the closest, so that cost would follow those lines as far as the amount. Timing to get the agreement or construction underway, the wholesale contracts on the Weatherford side would be a function of negotiating a contract and the time it would take for that. I have no idea what that would be. Obviously, there would be significant time involved. Other than that, the time would be comparable to building a new plant as far as the design and construction aspect of it. Fort Worth has told us that they do not believe there's any way that they could have anything done within a 6-year time frame. So they have said that they believe 2026 would be the earliest we would be in a position to, or they would be in a position to provide Willow Park with any kind of service.
To the best of your knowledge, that permit that they're getting at Mary's Creek, has that been contested?
I think it has. I know they've had some delays on the permitting, and I believe that has something to do with it. So for the new plant options at any of the given sites, 2 years for design and construction would be the projection, and that's kind of across the board. There's really not a huge difference between them. As far as the location is concerned, ability to expand, again, on the wholesale contracts, that would be a function of the contract and the negotiation. Obviously, would be a cost involved. The existing site is limited, and there was some mention about that earlier, so I'll go ahead and address that hopefully a little bit. But so there is room on that site to put another half MGD plant. I think there's actually room to possibly get a third half MGD plant, although it'd be very tight. And the reason for that is because of buffer requirements. You can't, even though you've got 7 acres there and you're only taking up whatever it is, half acre per half MGD site, you still have to get your buffer around the plant. And the layout of the plant is not conducive to, at that location, to achieving that buffer requirement. But there is some room for expansion.
Where would the effluent have to go from there? I mean,
Again, you could.
We're still upstream.
Right.
You know, from everything.
Yeah, that's the same situation. You could discharge your current 500,000 gallon a day allotment there. The rest of it would have to go somewhere
Have to be pumped downstream.
Yes. The TERS site actually has a decent amount of room for expansion, and it's mainly because of the way the site lays out. It's a little different configuration than the existing site. I think you could get a little more on it than the existing site, although probably not a whole lot more. The Kingsgate site has no room for expansion. I've looked at it, I've laid out the site a number of ways, and I don't believe you could get more than 1 MGD on that site, no matter what you did. So I think if you get it on there at all, you're pretty well stuck with 1 MGD at that site. And then, of course, the site south of I-20's 56 acres. There's quite a bit of room there for expansion. Other advantages: wholesale contract, no operational expenses, no plant in the city. Obvious benefits there. The existing site's already permitted for a discharge for a wastewater plant, so clearly there would be some advantages as far as permitting and getting it approved. The TERS is zoned for a WTP, so again, some permitting benefit there. Kingsgate is very close to the main lift station, which would probably reduce pumping costs significantly. The IH-20 site would allow service to more areas without pumping because it's downstream. Could potentially even eliminate the Kingsgate lift station for the same reason, and it's a little more isolated than the other sites. Disadvantages on the wholesale side, not in control of your rates long-term. Maybe some additional costs on the Weatherford side that are not known yet that they've indicated. The wholesale Fort Worth, again, not in control of the rates long-term. You kind of lose your ability to manage your own destiny there. The existing site, any future discharge increases, I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but that if you went above that 1 MGD, obviously more cost involved because you would have to have additional discharge improvements. TERS site would be similar, as well as Kingsgate. South of I-20 site would be further to go to the golf course, and irrigation at the golf course has been discussed quite a bit for a few years, and that's a real possibility. Although contracting for your disposal on a lease situation like that is probably not the ideal thing to do. It'd be better if you own the property, but that is certainly a way to get rid of some of it at least.
If we had a contract with Squaw Creek for irrigation, would we need an alternate, because that can be canceled at any time, correct?
Right.
So we would need an alternative no matter what if we pumped it to Squaw Creek. Actually, they would have to pay to have it pumped there.
Yeah, I believe that's the way you would want it. I mean, we've seen cases where that exact situation occurred, where somebody terminated the contract. That's why it would be better to own the facilities yourself.
Regardless of a third party, we're still responsible for the effluent.
Right. Yeah. If the other thing that comes into play there is even if they take it infinitum, there's a good possibility that they won't be able to take it all the time, and that may be a bigger issue. So if it's a really wet season, their lake is full, they don't need it, can't use it, more to the point, then you've still got to do something with it. So that's a very tricky situation that you got to be careful about. But I'm not saying it's not a good option for at least part of it, if not all of it. But it's something you really need to think about carefully. So kind of finally here, getting to the cost. Obviously, and on that table I just showed that there were, if you could lump the cost into one category, I think there were 9 categories. 7 out of the 9, the location south of I-20 would appear to be the more advantageous. Our recommendation, and it's just a recommendation, currently it's in the form of a preliminary engineering report that will have to be ratified. Or I should say not the preliminary, but it'll have to be finalized and put in the form of a final report and ratified before this really becomes anything. But from a purely engineering standpoint, this is clearly the best option. The cost that we're showing is $17 million. The reason that's $17 million and not the 14.13 is because we're including $2.9 million refinance of your existing sewer note. Under today's terms, compared to what that note was originally laid out at, would offset a considerable amount of debt service. So, because of terms.
To that point, real quick. So I pulled the rate sheet at 5 o'clock today from Water Development Board. So for a clean water SRF non-equivalency AA rated, and there's 2 deals here. So the refund will be under one rate, the construction would be under another rate. You are so on the refund that he was discussing, 30 years, a floating average of 24 basis points. That's the bad news. The good news is your plant or a wholesale contract or whatever you decide to do would be SRF equivalency AA rated, and that's a floating average of 0% over 30 years. This is today's rate sheet. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to catch your breath real quick. The sense of urgency is this. You're never going to see interest rates this low. You will never be able to borrow money this cheap ever again.
How many acres do we need for the plant?
Again, it depends on where it's at because of the way it's configured, but.
If it went on the
but
south
Minimum
side-
for just a plant, 8 acres.
8 acres.
8 to 10, say.
So if it went on the south side, all we would need is 8 acres.
If all you want to do is treat wastewater on the site, yes.
What else would we want to do on the side?
Irrigate.
So we just
If you
irrigate.
want room to irrigate, you would need obviously quite a bit more.
So we buy a bunch of property to irrigate, but then we're still dumping effluent.
Not if you own the property.
So we won't dump
well,
effluent if
there's-
we own the property?
There's two benefits there, okay? So if you own the property and you irrigate the property, you're not in the position where somebody could say, I don't need it or I don't want it. Okay, so you can always dispose of it that way. The other benefit would be you could irrigate some of it and then knowing that you always have that option and then reduce the size of your discharge that you have to discharge. So the cost of the discharge line and the facilities to discharge would be less. So there's a couple of benefits to considering the option of irrigating. I'm not saying that's something you have to do. I'm just saying that would be a benefit to you.
I'm just trying to figure out how much acreage we need.
Right.
Do you want to finish your presentation before we ask questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I've only got 2 more slides,
Okay.
so. So this, I included this slide the last time we did a presentation. The only reason I included it again is because it refers to that protected additional income based on your permitted development that you currently have. And that projection is in the neighborhood of $400,000 per year. So again, that's a pretty significant offset of debt service for the new plant. And just wanted to have that included for you guys. I was asked to include a kind of a synopsis of user costs based on starting at that $17 million projected cost for the recommended option, and then additional costs for other project selections in the increments of $500,000, $1 million, $5 million, and $10 million of additional costs to go to a different project. If you look at that first column where it says debt service, that $487,000, that is straight debt service. It's not adjusted for anything. That's strictly debt service on today's terms that Brian mentioned for $17 million note. And the others going down the list and the different increments are the same. They're just straight debt service for that amount of money under today's terms. That second column, average projected monthly user cost, that first one where it's $17.56, that is adjusted based on the number of projected development customers that you currently have going in the ground. And it also is adjusted the other direction for additional O&M costs that you would see for the additional capacity of the plant. So the user cost projected there based on those adjustments would be $17.56. If you go to the $500,000 increment increase, you would be adding roughly another $1, $2 for the one, and then $10 for the $5 million. You go up to $10 million increase in project costs, you're almost $20 per user per month. And so if you look at the far right, showing the percentages there, you're about 114% additional cost to add that extra $10 million. So that was something that was looked at before and wanted to bring that to your attention as well. That's all I've got. So know there's going to be questions and
questions.
Do you want to do questions? Or?
So regardless, if we leave the plant where it is, we will be definitely piping down the creek and depositing the effluent in the location specified by TCEQ, correct?
that is the only location, I mean,
Anywhere
that's
on
the
north-
only location.
Anywhere north of
As
the
far as
interstate, we have the
discharges.
same action. I mean, anywhere north of the interstate, regardless of
Right.
Kingsgate, the TERS, the existing location, it's all gonna go down south of the interstate about 2 miles, or, yeah.
As the river flows.
Yeah.
But,
And it's all gonna empty out there regardless.
right. I would,
Okay, I had a question on that. That was my, are we assuming that wherever it goes, $500,000 goes at that location and we're only piping what is in excess of what we're allowed to, what we
that's
have been
correct.
told we can discharge?
Yes.
So we will whatever location, there will be an outfall at that plant. That's
Correct.
$500,000.
That's what we're, yes,
Okay.
that would be,
Clarify
that would be acceptable to the TCEQ, and that's what we're assuming. Point two quick things out. One of them I intended to mention, the other one just struck me, but I would point out that no matter where you put the discharge, if you discharge where you're currently at, that discharge is going to the same location.
It ends up there anyway.
And very quickly. Secondly, I think there was some mention about the effluent quality, and I don't remember what was said, but when they permitted the $500,000 you've got, they lowered the permit requirements from what they typically would be. They're about as low as you can practically assume you can achieve at a treatment plant. I mean, you could put in some very sophisticated tertiary treatment, but it would be, you'd be better off spending the $10 million to do something else. But the effluent quality that you're putting in the river now, and you will be in the future, is about as low as you can possibly achieve.
Now,
And you won't see many permits like that in the state.
So for the location south of the interstate, that's 56 acres, correct? So if we take 8 for the plant and then irrigate the rest, how much of the 1 million gallons does that take over?
It's very difficult to say without, you would have to do some soil sampling and some different things. I mean, my guess is probably not all of it, but a large 75%.
Okay, so then we're significantly reducing the discharge into the creek if we use that facility.
Yeah, I would think, and the cost of the irrigation would be much less than other types of facilities.
And then if we have, if we had a backup, then to pipe it from the plant south of the interstate up to the golf course, what are we talking about there? The gray water piping up to the golf course, what is that, about a 6-inch?
Cost-wise? Oh, the size? Well, it depends on how much you do, but I mean, if you're talking about discharging some of it, irrigating some on site, and then sending some to the golf course, you might be talking 6 to 8 inch. That's,
yeah,
a lot of speculation there.
In your numbers, did you have any estimate of what the gray water piping from south of the interstate to the golf course would be?
I think I figured about 600,000.
Okay.
And I did assume there would be some volume offset by using. You wouldn't be sending it all that way.
Right.
So
between those two options, irrigating on site, irrigating at the golf course, we eliminate a significant portion of any discharge in the creek itself.
Well, maybe, but again, if you're in a contracted situation, that's a little, you have to be really careful. So if you're going to rely on it, which I think is what you're saying, irrigate it at the site and then send all the rest to the golf course.
So we'd have 3 options for discharge on site. Irrigate the plant where it is on the 56 acres, send some to the golf course, and then as a backup, if we have to discharge any, it goes into the creek, and if we have a wet season, we may have to discharge more and get rid of it, right?
Yeah, as long as you're making sure you have the ability to get rid of all of it,
Okay.
That would be a possibility.
How many conversations did y'all have with Alito?
I personally met with him on 2 different occasions with other people. I don't know. I know there were other. I'm not the only one that talked to him.
I had discussions with Bill and his staff early 2019. We had a follow-up conversation a couple weeks later. They were not prepared, and it was we were highly encouraged to look elsewhere for a wholesale contract. After the June meeting, I had a follow-up meeting with Bill again, and the situation remained the same.
Well, you mentioned that they weren't planning, they didn't have any plan, but they have a 3-phase plan. I'm just
I
trying to
didn't say they
figure
didn't have a
out.
plan. I think I said they were early in their planning process. And as far as that, they don't have any hard numbers to give us.
Yeah.
So I think they're just in the early stages right now.
How many meetings did you have with Kit Doyle about this?
Brian talked to city manager.
You never talked to Kit?
No.
Having a senior moment here. Oh, I apologize.
I have dozens of questions if you want to think about it. Go ahead. You want to speak, Eric? Okay.
Yeah, Rose, can you put up a TC&Q map of the discharge locations that are current right now? So it looks like there's a lot of discharge going into Derrick, Lake Weatherford, and also already into the Clear Fork Trinity. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Besides ours, upstream?
Yeah, all of those red dots, yours is one of them,
Right.
but all the others are independent, other individual discharges.
And I see Alito's. Is that Alito's discharge location right there at the very bottom?
Yes.
Okay. Here's another question. Do you think we'd maybe consider talking to maybe Split Rail and see if they would need some effluent if we were ever to consider the south of I-20 location to help?
Yeah, I mean, I know they take effluent now.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
From Annetta.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, but, I mean, I think it'd be a good idea to talk to anybody and anyone. One thing I didn't mention also, I don't want to,
And
I don't want to interrupt you.
are all the red dots really the reason why that location, that circle of the area that we can't do additional effluent, is that maybe the reason why?
Why it's impaired?
Yes.
Well, obviously, the discharges probably have some impact on it. I think, and I think you'll find that this would bear out, is that most of it is probably stormwater runoff, pollution, you know, off streets, roads, parking lots, that kind of thing. I think that's typically where you see most of the impairment. Sewer discharges obviously must have an impact, especially, you know, the worse it's treated, the more impact it has. Again, your effluent is pretty good right now. You also have potential for leaking septic systems, animal waste. You know, there's a lot of things that contribute, but mainly stormwater runoff.
So I recall my question now. So is there a way of doing an odor test or parts per million or billion of, you know, to understand objectively how much odor that plant is putting out compared on new plants?
I think there are some instruments you can use. I'm not intimately familiar with any of them, but I believe there is possibly some things you can do.
Okay.
Now there's, you know, Alito has an odor reduction system at their plant. And it adds cost, but it's not, you know, out of the realm of possibility. In fact, there is some contingency in the cost, and we started looking at it when we were doing work on it in 2015, but there is some contingency in there for that at this point.
About how much additional cost is an odor control system?
I think it's on the order of about $100,000.
Okay, any other questions? We don't have room, we don't have time for 12.
You're very fortunate. I only had 11, and I've already crossed off a lot of them. I did want to mention, so we looked at 4 actual permanent locations. Last June, when we got our CIP, we were looking at the Bluffs. Is there a reason that was eliminated from the discussion?
The Bluffs?
The Bluffs was in the CIP?
The TERS.
I think that was the TERS.
No, the actual Bluffs.
Yeah,
It was above
the area
TERS.
north of the TERS, the
Yeah.
82 acres, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I would assume.
You know, not really, other
Just
than.
didn't progress to, I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same essential location as existing plant and TERS. but I
Right,
just was
so it'd be
curious.
so close to that location. The
Okay.
numbers would probably be similar,
Okay.
although it might be a little further away.
And challenge is the same. I recognize that. I just didn't know if there was,
I think
just to
your
check
land-
the box to say.
To
we
be completely honest, I don't.
Okay,
Your land acquisition cost would be a lot higher than.
okay.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that may have been. So the biggest concern that I'm looking at, and that we've already discussed a little bit in the process for the water board application, its discharge point and how that works and how the whole process of getting that permitted. But if I understood you correctly during the water board discussion, we would be putting it out there as a potential location, and if we can't get it permitted, we will know before we continue, and we could go to option number 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, I guess I'm just going to say, all the better to start sooner. Because if any of our options don't work out, then we could be a year down the line with a roadblock. So I guess what I am curious if we can do, and I don't know how many other questions other people had, my thought was if we can funnel additional questions or questions that have kind of come up and have you or Brian or whoever work on those so that when we present this again for an action item, you're aware of additional questions that have come up that we may have, not fully discussed tonight.
Great.
Is that how we think this process is going to go?
That'd be fine, yes.
Okay, and we can not necessarily spell them all out right now at 9 p.m., but we can.
We're not through with questions.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that was my
yes.
hope, is that we could ask for some additional information regarding that.
Sure.
And I have no other comments or
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you. Great job.
Thanks, Derek.
I have a couple comments on this. I'm going to ask for unanimous consent from the mayor and council to speak uninterrupted on this agenda item. If that's okay. So I just want to say good evening. I've known David for 30 years. I mean, his kids, your family. I'm going to speak tonight to everybody, Willow Park residents, our neighbors in North Annetta, Aledo and Annetta. Tonight, I want to give you, as a gentleman earlier gave, a lot of facts and a story, because there's a lot of story behind this that hasn't been told. There's a lot of people out there putting little pieces of information that are untrue out there that's really stirring up the public. And my goal is for everybody to understand the story better and understand the facts on this. When I came into council, I swore an oath to uphold the United States Constitution. And my belief that is everyone has the right to exercise their First Amendment right, period. But I would like to address the many rumors and conspiracy theories, because you brought up some conspiracy theories that are out there. They're going around on multiple social media platforms. And I can right now unequivocally say that no one, to the best of my knowledge, has violated any rules, any laws, or has done anything unethical at this time. These rumors are false, period. Fake news, conspiracy theories. You have been deceived. So now I want to talk to you about the facts. And this goes back a long, long history. So the first person who owned the property where our current facility is at, her name is Dorothy Yearly. And in the 90s, the city of Willow Park condemned her property to kick her off, and in order to put a wastewater treatment facility there. Later on, that lawsuit was settled. So we can get in, well, I'm not, it's quite a bit length, but I'm going to shorten it up. I know it's getting really late, so I apologize. So this problem was identified May 12th, 2015, in the city council meeting. It was item number 7. To really talk about what happens when that original plan gets to the 75% capacity point, and then when it gets to 90, because we have to start the planning phase of it, then we have to start the execution where we're actually doing the construction. So they authorized the staff to do a RFQ for engineering and financial services for a wastewater system improvement for that new plant. Between that time, there was a lot of online petitions that people were putting out there that they didn't want Willow Park to be in the actual sewer treatment business. January 12th of 2016, council decided to schedule a town hall, which a lot of people knew about, that was at Willow Park Baptist. That was in March. So they had the town hall. What came out of that was, you have your, right here, the summary, and this is public information from the then city administrator, Matt Schaffstall, really indicating that out of everything that was discussed, a biowill treatment plant and securing land was the best possibility for wastewater. That's what came out of the town hall meeting, and that's the recommendation. And so they advised the city to talk with Willow Park Baptist, because they own the land adjacent to our existing facility right now. Willow Park Baptist put out a statement in the community news that said, this is community news. Church not interested in deal for wastewater plant. I think we all know where that's going to go. So they're not interested in selling any of their property. So now we're going into April of 2016 after the Willow Park Baptist land acquisition was tried for. So now item number 6 that came out of executive session was to look at a parcel of property north of the Clear Fork, Trinity River, which is the TERS property that everybody's been talking about. And to look at everything that goes with putting a wastewater treatment facility there. And that passed unanimously with council. In June of 2014, or excuse me, June 14th of 2016, excuse me, they authorized the city administrator to obtain cost estimates and initial procedure steps to get a package plant. So they needed a temporary fix right now. They wanted to get something long-term, but they needed a temporary fix, which is what we have right now. And at that same meeting, they formed a advisory committee called the Wastewater Treatment Plant Advisory Committee, which council member Runenbaum was on, and former councilwoman Galley was on, which she spoke earlier tonight. They had a July meeting in 2016 to discuss a lot of the responses to the municipal request and to get a package plant deal and to figure out who to award it to. And that was approved to go on and move forward with that. August 9th of 2016, the city administrator recommended a permanent solution. This is item number 10, a permanent solution to the city's wastewater issue. And that is here, this memo right here, okay? This memo right here says, from Bobby Roundtree, interim city administrator. There's a lot I could read, but I'm just going to kind of summarize it to you. That they explored the possibilities of partnering with the cities of Aledo and Fort Worth. Willow Park could spend millions of dollars, estimated 14 to 15 million, on land acquisition infrastructure to pipe and pump waste to these cities. If we partnered with either of these cities, the city of Willow Park would lose local control of its future wastewater rates with no economically feasible way to get out of the agreement. Meaning is they could hike your rates up at any point. And that's why this recommendation here, or this not recommendation, this exploring of this opportunity here went nowhere, because it's not fair to the people of Willow Park that do sewer that their rates could explode at any moment. Bobby Roundtree's opinion was to acquire a permanent location and construct a wastewater plant to be owned and operated by the city of Willow Park is the most viable option. It is the most cost effective, which he estimated $10 to $12 million at that time, and Willow Park would maintain control of its rates. And a TC&Q later was also attached, and that went to Derek Turner, and you had that as well, and this is also public information as well, which pretty much just said that we need to follow the process that Derek had laid out. So an interesting point here. Council member Galley made a motion to accept the recommendation of the city administrator and acquire a permanent site, engage an engineering firm to design the facility and take bids and construct the permanent wastewater treatment plant within the 3-year window provided by the temporary wastewater treatment plant. So we had a temporary wastewater treatment plant, which was in place right now, but we wanted to have something permanent done within the 3-year window. And tonight she said that she wanted to have to either go to the TERS location, which is the location that we had mentioned earlier, or do a wholesale piece of it. Wholesale piece of it fell through. She agreed that that is not the option. And so she had recommended that we go to the TERS location. Well, not the TERS location, but to a permanent location. So, moving on. In December, they approved the wastewater treatment package plant and proposed a force main upgrade in 2016. In January of 2017, they authorized an interim wastewater treatment plant. They gave the contract to AUC Group LP. And just kind of moving forward, because I know we're getting a little pressed on time, the actual debt that was determined for the project size of the wastewater project to be financed by certificates of obligation was $2.725 million. And that was approved by council, 5-0. So in March 14th of 2017, item 16 was to consider authorizing the execution and receipt of certain special warranty deeds by and from the city with WPD Trinity LLC for exchange, sale, or transfer of certain tracts of land related to the operation of municipal utilities. And there's an attachment to that that had the actual deed listed out, and it was a land swap for our current location we have right now with the TERS location. And this was between the city of Willow Park and the Wilkes. And this would be a land swap for $10 on each direction. So they would pay us 10 and we'd pay them 10. That's what the information indicates. And a motion to take no action was passed and approved. So we had an opportunity to get land for $10 each direction, and we didn't take that. And this is the land that's been identified, right? This is the land we're talking about that would be the ideal location. May 18, 2017, item 7, to discuss and consider exchange of property for future wastewater treatment plants. Mr. Turner and Mr. Roundtree put together a giant package which included a feasibility study, and they said that the current location that we're in right now could not handle an expansion and have room for maintenance or further expansions. Councilmember Runnenbaugh, who was on that committee, made the motion to approve the exchange of property for the future wastewater treatment plant to get it done, right? We were going to get this solved, and this could have been May 18, 2017 to get the land acquired so we can start the process. No second. Nobody from council seconded. A motion to table the item to the next meeting passed 5-0. So we tried a location that somebody had identified and somebody agreed that we needed to do. We had the opportunity and we tabled it. Community news article came out. There are multiple quotes from multiple people on council about that. You can read that if you'd like. It was the community news article, May 26, 2017. June 13, 2017, we had item number 14, to discuss and consider assigning a team to investigate alternatives for wastewater utility operations. So this was a creation of a second team now to look into wastewater options. And this is now looking into wholesale. Specifically, it named the city of Weatherford. That passed with council 5-0. Item 15, discussion action to discuss and consider setting a date for a called meeting, which is like a forum or a town hall, for the purpose of discussing future wastewater treatment plant sites. This item was brought by council members Galley and Fennell. Councilwoman Galley motioned to table it. Councilwoman Fennell seconded that. It passed 5-0. So we could have had a town hall, we could have had a forum, and we tabled it to discuss our options again with the city. June 15th, the TCEQ permit was submitted for the package plant by Derek. It was approved July 10th, 2017. And then we start going on to building our temporary wastewater treatment facility we have right now. Lots of little things going about rate changes, passing for electrical and everything else. May 15, 2018, City Council meeting minutes. Item 13, to approve a wastewater services memorandum of understanding with the City of Weatherford. So we're trying again with the City of Weatherford to see if that's an option. And it passed by council 4-0. And now we're at the current, or which is a current or slightly modified offer from the city of Weatherford. So we've been talking about this forever. Okay? And I think the people of Willow Park understand this. And we had plenty of times to solve it. Councilmember Runenbaugh made a bold choice to try to do it based on all the advice from everybody, and he never got a second.
So that's exactly right. We've had opportunity after opportunity.
Right here. And that gentleman earlier had a huge binder of stuff, and he said the exact same story. It's facts. I'm sorry. It's just facts. There's no opinion. There's no spin. That is just facts, and it's all public record.
So the one thing that I didn't hear you mention, Eric, was that, was it 2016, 2017, when we thought we had a contract with Weatherford, in the 11th hour, they pulled out of it. So, you know, my opinion up to that point was that we should definitely get a wholesale contract and get, you know, with the neighboring city. Now that, you know, we've been through that experience and how they, you know, the loss of control of cost to our citizens for waste treatment services, I think that's a bad way to go, because we could be up to the 11th hour and have the contract pulled out from under us and not signed. So we need to be in control of what we do. We need to have a low risk solution, and we are down to the wire because these things take years, as you can see, to plan, fund, build, and put into place. So this isn't an overnight decision. This is nothing that, you know, somebody said, hey, this is a good idea, we need to do this right now. No, this has been since I've been on council in 2014, this has been discussed and worked on. So my experience with it goes back 6 years. So to say that, you know, this is a overnight, you know, knee-jerk reaction is not true at all. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate you putting that together.
Thanks, Eric. Thank Greg. Okay, well, there'll be other discussion on this, I'm sure, moving forward. We're going to item number 8, consider and act on items to be considered for future council meetings. Mr. Grimes?
We have a meeting next week that's scheduled. We plan to have the intent is to bring up the contracts for Jacob Martin, Hilltop, Norton Hills, Fulbright for approval from council. My mind just went blank. I'm sorry. We've got a number of items on my whiteboard that I can share with you.
Wastewater treatment plant, do we plan to do this, to follow up with the questions
Well,
from
did you
this
want
week?
to, are we going to go into executive?
Yes.
We have that, okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, that would be, so that
Yeah.
would be, and so if your mind went blank, I have mine written down. These don't have to be next week, but City Hall update we've talked about, whether or not that fits on the agenda.
We're going to have a meeting on, the City Hall Committee will meet next Thursday, so we plan to have an update for you guys at the August meeting.
Okay. The budget calendar we've already done.
Mm-hmm.
Stormwater fee study, again, not necessarily for the next upcoming, but get it on the schedule for whether it's in August or when we'll have the stormwater fee study presented.
Is that ready?
Yeah, we have a draft.
Okay, all right. Those are my items that I'd like to see on future council meetings.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Grimes?
Chief, did you want to bring up the solicitation ordinance, or do you want to take that up in the next fiscal year?
I'm open to either.
Okay. Okay.
And I lied, I had one more. Retail coach, if we could get an update on
Aaron
development.
Farmer, he just became a proud new papa last
Okay.
week, the third time papa, I guess.
Okay.
The intent is to be here on the 28th.
Okay, so that's just,
Okay.
Leah, you and I talked about contracting process, that we have that as a discussion item for our next meeting, like the way that we go about
I believe that
contracts.
what we have is the agreements, that is the first item he mentioned. The agreements, the application agreements will be on the agenda next week.
Well, you and I also talked about the, when I emailed Pat about this contract, and he said that all contracts, any purchases are supposed to come before us. And there have been some contracts that haven't come before us apparently, and do you not remember that conversation?
I remembered saying that we would get this agreement on the agenda, so.
Okay.
I don't recall that we discussed an agenda item for just general.
Yeah, just in general, like, RFPs when they're approved, and if we may, possibly council would like to consider a different engineering firm or different options for it to come before us in the future.
Okay, I'd say let's figure out what we want on the agenda item and discuss whether that's something we want to add.
I don't understand. What are you saying?
I'm just, with the contracting process, Doyle being able to sign a $670,000 contract, I'm not looking at micromanaging. My job is to protect the interests of the taxpayers, and I need to know where those taxpayer dollars are going, and they're being committed.
How about, I'm not saying anytime soon, but how about having the way Derek did the process for the application process, maybe having Pat give us an overview of how the review process needs to work for contracts and RFPs?
Well, this is the first contract RFP thing, in my experience on council, that hasn't come before council.
Well, it will be on.
No, but I'm talking about before it was signed.
We had the water system last year that went through the exact same process. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Went through this exact same process. So if you didn't say something then, why are you saying something now?
Because I knew.
What's the difference?
I knew what was going on with the water system. I knew when things were going out to RFP. I saw the documentation. I have not seen anything on this. Nothing.
It's been there. Okay.
No, Doyle, it has not been there.
I disagree.
It has not. Look in my email.
We're going to item number 9. Consider an act on setting the date and time for next council meeting.
That would be the next regular meeting is July 28th, 7 p.m. City Hall.
Okay. This time we're going to an executive session. We're going to take about a 4-minute break. Executive session will convene at 9:25 p.m.